Hi, I'm Charlotte, and this is Tired Mama Tries to Read. So it's been a month, which I didn't expect to be. It's been Victober. I was planning on doing weekly updates and vlogs and what have you, but I took Victober a lot more seriously than everybody else and got bronchitis and was quite literally bedridden. I had a virus straight after the bronchitis, and then just as I was getting over the virus, I then got a really nasty cold. So I have quite literally been ill for a month, and before you all very generously suggest all the vitamins and stuff I need to be taking, it genuinely isn't any of that. It is just having a small person in school, and he picks up everything, and he doesn't sleep, so I don't sleep, and I think it's just a big combination of that. So I am back eating more or less normally now because I haven't eaten properly, and if I look very sort of slight, it's because I've lost about a stone. But so I didn't do a lot of reading. I've actually, looking at the stack in front of me now, I did do quite a lot. But for the first like week or so of bronchitis, I was completely laid up in bed. There's nothing I could do, and I'd already planned to read Elizabeth Gaskell's Wives and Daughters. So that was the one that I just decided to start with the biggest book first in Victober to sort of get it out of the way, because I didn't feel that if I started with the others, sometimes towards the end of the October month, you kind of feel a little bit drained from reading all that Victorian literature. I can hear the diggers again. We have diggers nearby and there's nothing I can do, so if you hear beeping, I'm really sorry, but we'll try and get through it before they come back. Yeah, so I wanted to start with this one first, and it was just the perfect choice. So I know a lot of you have read it, and then after I posted my last video, I also know a lot of you haven't gotten around to it. It's amazing. I mean, I'm a big Elliot fan. I'm big into having lots of different characters, lots of detail, you know, really just getting absorbed, and that's exactly what this gave to me. The story just didn't go where I expected it to go, and the characters that I was sympathetic with at the start, and I kind of felt like it was a little bit sort of you know, there's that Victorian moralistic side to the novels where, you know, good people eventually out and bad people get their comeuppance. That can sometimes happen, and it can make it predictable, but there's nothing about this that does that. The good characters, you know, I'm not necessarily saying anything bad happens to them, but they almost become less interesting than the bad characters, if you see what I mean. And the bad characters are redeemable to a certain point. It's, yeah, without giving away plot lines, it's hard to sort of explain what I mean by that. But if you've read it, you'll know. I just thoroughly encourage any of you to read it. I will always remember this book now for being ill in bed, but in the good way. Like, I was so ill and there was nothing good about it. But when I was reading this, there's quite a lot of convalescent characters in it who are also ill in bed. And there was something very comforting about that fact. So yeah, I don't know what it was about the setting for me of also being quite ill kind of made the book better. I don't know how, but it was awesome, and I've got to read everything else now that she's ever written. Then I went straight to Agnes Grey by Anne Bronte, and this was for me, you know, don't think people will be massively surprised when I say it was kind of like a 3-star read for me, and I kind of feel like a lot of people feel similarly. But actually I found it very interesting. It was a 3-star read, enjoyment of the novel itself, but the story around it and actually some of the portions in it are like 5-star interesting. So I found reading the introduction, which in my edition was quite big actually, quite a hefty sort of introduction. It went into the details about Anne's relationship with Charlotte, and I've never really thought much about the sisterly relationship other than that I kind of have this image of them all writing around the dining table and then reading each other their work, because I think that's quite well documented that they did that. But in the introduction here, who does the introduction, I should Angeline Garreau, she sort of details that actually Charlotte was pretty much the only one who said that they did that, and they did it for a very short period of time, but a lot of the time Anne and Emily were writing together, and Charlotte had quite an almost babified view of what Anne was really like, and Anne really displayed quite opposite traits quite frequently, but Charlotte would sort of write them off and say that's not the real Anne. You know, she didn't want Tenant of Wildfell Hall remade after Anne's death. I don't think she wanted it included in this compendium because she didn't feel it reflected her sister's true character. Whereas when you read this, there's real sort of snippets of anger and real sort of bawdy humour in the voices of some of the children. The actual, Agnes Grey is kind of meh, and I think that's why a lot of people sort of go, well, she's no Jane Eyre. But the children's voices express, not meant to like them, but they express a side that I kind of feel was Anne's naughty side. Sorry that my throat is just still not quite right. My Jester. So anyway, I really found her interesting, and I want to read more about the Brontes, and I would like to read Tenant of Wildfell Hall. I kind of was going to go straight into it, but then I got that virus and I didn't read anything for a week, and after the virus I just needed something really just easy to read. So I'd already picked this up, The Last by Hannah Jameson. I picked it up in a supermarket, and this is a kind of the subline is one hotel, 20 survivors, who will be the last. And it's kind of an apocalyptic, there's been nuclear war, and there's a group of survivors holed up in a hotel in Switzerland, and then they start dying, and there's apparent that there might be a murderer present. And there's also, there's what drew me to it was there's a lot of political commentary about what created, it's not overt, but in the background, about what created this nuclear war. And there's all sorts of comments like, they're trying to guess which of the people there voted for him. So that's Trump. So I found that really interesting. And it was an intelligent read. It was one of those sort of thrillers, but for the sort of person who maybe doesn't always read thrillers. So it was good, and it did what it was meant to do. I found the ending a little bit disappointing. I thought it was going to be a surprise. And I felt there were lots of loose ends that weren't tied up, which I do find a lot with some of these thrillers. I know you've got to give little teasers as to what could happen, but ultimately I also want a little bit, if one of the teasers is more interesting than what actually happened at the end, which I sometimes find. My dad read it as well straight after me, and he found the same. He really enjoyed it. It did what it was meant to do, but he was a bit like, the ending was a little bit. But don't let that put you off, actually, because it was a really good escapist read. It's one of the best escapist reads I've read in a long time. Then I went on to read Bleeker House by Nell Stevens. How far would you travel to become a writer? This is so good. Nell Stevens was, she did other jobs, but then she went on to do an MA in creative writing in Boston. Part of the end of the MA was that she got a 3-month writer in residence thing in anywhere in the world that she wanted, and other members of the class had the same thing. I presume at the expense of the university. I don't really know how that works. Friends of hers chose places like Paris to go and be a writer in residence. Nell Stevens chose an island off the Falklands called Bleeker, which had an official population of 2, but they weren't there when she was there. She doesn't spend the full 3 months alone, but she spends a massive chunk of it alone, more or less starving on the rations that she has brought because she hasn't thought any of it through. And all this time she's taken Bleak House with her, partly because of the name of the island being Bleeker, and her friend had joked that she should write a novel called Bleeker House. And she takes Bleak House with her, and she tries to write a novel, which was the whole point of all of their writers in residence thing, was that they were all meant to go off and do creative writing. But for Nell, this was like a really important thing because she'd never successfully written a novel, and she's really critical of her own work. She's one of those people who says, I say I'm a writer, but am I? Because I don't actually write anything, which I could very much relate to. I've always said I wanted to write, and then it never happens. So I found this really inspirational. There are bits in there where she talks about quite traumatic things that are going on in the world around her, and sometimes right in front of her. And in those parts, you almost dislike her because you can't quite comprehend how she can be still going on about herself and all these awful things are happening. Like there's a small section about the Boston Marathon and the bombing that happened there. But when you actually get to the end, you realise she's kind of mocking herself. So don't give up. Those little passages put me off a little bit, because there's a few of them. She goes to Syria and places like that. She's kind of drawing attention to the fact that we all do that. We can encounter something quite horrendous and then be preoccupied with the fact that we've run out of bread and we're really annoyed at our partner because they were meant to buy it. So I kind of feel that's where she's gone with it. But she hasn't spoon-fed you and explained that, and you kind of work that out by the end. She admits she's kind of preoccupied, self-obsessed. She wants to write this novel. She's made mistakes. She's hurt people. But ultimately, she still needs to believe in herself and not completely get caught up in the fact that she does things wrong. And I think that's something I could definitely relate to. yeah, I really enjoyed it, and it's inspired me to do another video, which I'm going to film straight after this, which is book pairs. So this is obviously going to be paired with Bleak House, so I'm going to do that in a mo. And then I've been dipping into, and I'm about a third of the way through Daily Rituals, Women at Work by Mason Curry. And this was the one that I talked about a little while ago when I hauled it. It's all women writers, artists, dancers, fashion designers, loads of really interesting people, and just little tiny snippets about how they organise their days. So just a couple of pages per person, sometimes with a nice picture, some really nice photos in there, about whether they got up at 6, had a religious breakfast of bacon and eggs, then went to the studio, or whether they were the type of people that just didn't ever appear to be writing or doing anything, and then would hold themselves up for 3 months or just magically produce a novel. Some of the dancers and the choreographers are quite incredible for their work ethic, to the point where families, you know, suffered essentially. And I haven't gotten to it's separated into little sections, and there's been a couple of women so far who've had children, but barely any. So I'm assuming there's going to be a bit coming up soon about how mothers have coped with writing, because he says in the beginning that's the real difference between the book he wrote previously, which was mostly about men. It wasn't meant to be, but it ended up being. That the men just didn't have those commitments that the women have. And when he decided to write this book about women, he saw the difference between the two. So that kind of I don't know how this led me to this. Actually I do know. It's because I read Nell Stevens has also written a book about Elizabeth Gaskell. Why do I want to say Elizabeth Cranford? It's because she wrote Cranford. Elizabeth Gaskell. And then that kind of led me to Bleeker House. And then I think because I was reading about Elizabeth Gaskell in here, they've all merged into one another. So yeah, I would definitely recommend this. I think it's due out in paperback soon if the hardback is too much, or you can go to the library. So that was a little short, sharp video. I was going to say that I did choose a winner for the special Milkman edition, and I have put a notification, and I've actually been in contact with Valentina, so she knows that she's won the copy, and I will be sending that off very soon. I don't think there's any more news. No, it's been a grim month, I'm not gonna lie. I think we've all been there, but I never remember being ill like this before I had a child. Like, I'd catch a cold, and you'd always have one at Christmas, you know, but I never remember this distinct turn of the weather going cold and suddenly just non-stop illness. I don't really remember that as a child either, but I went to a very, very small primary school where there was about 9 children in the entire school. So, you know, Idris is in a classroom with like 20 other children, and then there's another 20 that use the class directly after them. So he's just, you know, I think they just catch a little bit more than they used to. They're just surrounded by more. So yeah, I'm going to do the pairs video, and I might upload them both in one day. Why not? I might save it because, let's face it, it might be a month before I do anything more. I'm not going to be doing Non-Fiction November or Nov, just because, as I've said, Victober is pretty much the only readathon I do, and even that was a bit of a bust. I did start the Oscar Wilde, by the way, but I've already given it away to a charity shop. I couldn't do it, my friends. Couldn't do it. He's just not my taste. And what was the other one I had for non-fiction for Victober? Can't remember what the other one was, but I did the 2. I got bronchitis. I think I'm done, you know. I think that's enough. That's enough commitment. Thank you to all the hosts for Victober. I've enjoyed your videos, and yeah, I hope you all had a really, really nice time. Let me know what you read for Victober. If you do have any miracle remedies for small children being ill, like dipping them in some kind of substance when they come home from school, let me know that as well. Okay, I shall see you all soon. Bye.